Welcome back, deep divers. Ready for another plunge into history?
Always.
Today, we're diving deep into the story of the Titanic.
Ah, the Titanic.
We've got this fascinating dissertation that goes way beyond the iceberg, beyond the too few lifeboats narrative.
Right. Gets into all those factors that maybe, contributed to the tragedy.
Exactly. So it uses tons of sources, firsthand accounts, official inquiries, all that good stuff.
Trying to paint a more, complete picture, I guess you could say.
Yeah, a more complete, maybe a bit more unsettling picture of what really went down that night.
It's really unsettling.
So let's set the stage a bit. It's 1912, right? The Titanic, owned by the White Star Line, all shiny and new, setting off on its maiden voyage.
The ship to end all ships.
Right. This wasn't just some boat. It was massive,
Mm.
over 880 feet long,
A floating city.
and luxurious. Oh, man. They had a squash court on board, a swimming pool, Turkish baths even.
Talk about luxury, huh?
I mean, they're really spared no expense. It makes the whole thing even more, I don't know, tragic maybe.
Definitely adds to the drama. The Titanic was like the pinnacle of, engineering and luxury at the time.
Totally. But it was also a product of its time, right? Like with
Yeah.
some of those societal norms and regulations that, looking back, seem kind of unbelievable.
Yeah, some things were just different back then.
Like the whole lifeboat thing. Obviously, there weren't enough for everyone on board.
Yeah, that's probably the most well-known, failure.
But what's interesting is the dissertation points out that Titanic actually had more lifeboats than regulations required at the time.
Interesting. So they were technically in compliance, but
But it still wasn't enough. Which kind of shows you, even when you think you're being safe, you might not be thinking about all the what-ifs.
all the possibilities.
Right. And that's where this dissertation gets really interesting. Dives into all these contributing factors, little things that, when you put them all together, well, they had a huge impact.
Like a domino effect.
So you have this luxurious, super advanced ship for its time, right? But then you have the human element. The dissertation really explores the pressure on Captain Smith to make good time on this maiden voyage.
Yeah. There must have been a lot of pressure to perform.
Imagine that, right? You're the captain of this supposed marvel of engineering. Were those expectations, do you think, pushing him to, I don't know, take risks?
Could be. And it gets even more, complex when you consider the Titanic actually received several warnings.
Warnings.
Yeah, wireless warnings about ice in the area. But Captain Smith, he didn't really change course or slow down significantly,
So he knew about the ice, but
but kept going. And get this, there's even an anecdote, it's in the dissertation, about Bruce Ismay. He was the managing director of the White Star Line. And supposedly, he, casually pocketed a warning message about icebergs.
oh wow, like it was nothing. Talk about a disregard for safety.
It's really crazy when you think about it. It makes you wonder what their priorities were. Were they so focused on speed and luxury that they completely overlooked the potential dangers?
Yeah, speed and luxury over safety. And then there's this whole coal thing. Did you know that before the Titanic even set sail, there was a coal strike?
A coal strike? Really?
Yeah, so they couldn't fully stock the ship's coal bunkers.
Sure.
And the dissertation explores the possibility that Captain Smith might have been trying to conserve fuel, which could have played into, his decision-making process.
Oh, wow. So not only the pressure to make good time, but maybe also pressure to conserve fuel.
It all adds another layer to the story.
It really does.
And just when you think it can't get any more complicated, there's this whole fire theory.
The fire theory.
Yeah, the idea that a coal bunker fire had been smoldering like for weeks before the voyage even started, and that it could have weakened the ship's structure.
A fire on board before it even left.
Apparently. And the dissertation, it actually cites testimonies from firemen who were, trying to put this fire out.
Yeah.
And there's expert analysis that suggests it really could have been a significant factor.
Huh. A fire on a ship made of, mostly wood. That seems like, asking for trouble.
Right. It's like each of these factors could have compounded the next one.
A chain reaction.
Yeah. And then, get this, the dissertation also goes into the materials that were used to build the Titanic. Apparently, studies on pieces of the hull they've recovered suggest that the steel plates, they were more brittle than ideal.
Brittle steel.
Yeah, they fractured more easily on impact.
Interesting. So not only the fire, but the materials themselves.
And then there's the rivets, those metal pins that hold the hull plates together.
Right, the rivets.
Well, they contained more slag than usual. Slag's a byproduct of the smelting process, right? And too much of it can weaken the metal.
So weaker rivets, more brittle steel.
you're telling me the unsinkable ship might have been built with, well, flawed material.
It's a possibility, and when you combine that with everything else, the speed, the ignored warnings, the possible fuel shortages, that coal fire, it really starts to change how you see the whole Titanic disaster.
It's mind-blowing. All these seemingly unrelated things all coming together on that one night.
Fate, maybe? Or just a series of unfortunate events?
I don't know. But it definitely makes you question those simple explanations we've all heard. The iceberg was just the, I don't know, the final blow.
Yeah, there's so much more to it. It's a lot to take in, right? And, we've only just scratched the surface. This dissertation also gets into all the myths and legends surrounding the Titanic.
Oh yeah, those. Like the whole unsinkable ship thing. Was that, did people actually believe that?
Well, it's interesting. The dissertation goes into how that idea became so, I don't know, attached to the Titanic. The White Star Line, they never actually advertised it as unsinkable.
They didn't.
No. But they did emphasize its safety features, like the watertight compartments, remotely activated doors, all that. On paper, it seemed like it could withstand almost anything.
So more like what, a PR spin than an actual claim?
Exactly. But then, after the tragedy, the unsinkable ship thing, it took on this whole new meaning. It became a symbol of, I don't know, maybe overconfidence, a cautionary tale about pushing the limits too far.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about that story about David Sarnoff and the SOS? Didn't he say he was the first to receive the Titanic's distress call?
Right, that's a popular one. But not entirely true. The dissertation actually debunks that. Sarnoff, he did play a role in, relaying the news of the disaster.
She did.
Yeah, but the actual distress calls, those were handled by the wireless operators on the Titanic and other ships nearby. They were using CQD back then, which was the standard distress signal before SOS.
So Sarnoff wasn't like the lone hero listening in the night.
Yeah.
Kind of a bummer, actually.
It does make for a good story, but it's important to give credit where credit's due, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those wireless operators, they were crucial in the rescue efforts.
Totally. Okay, last myth. The band playing as the ship went down. How much of that is true?
It's such a powerful image, right? The band playing on deck as the Titanic sinks. And, well, there is evidence that the band did play during the sinking. But the specifics, like what song they played last, that's much less clear. The dissertation mentions conflicting accounts from survivors.
So no one's really sure what happened.
Some remember different songs, some don't remember any music at all. It's like, over time, the legend might have taken on a life of its own, blending facts with sentiment.
I guess that happens a lot with these kinds of stories. Okay, let's move on to something even more, I don't know, mysterious. Conspiracy theories.
Ah, yes, those. This dissertation dives into those too.
It does.
Yeah. Always keeping in mind, of course, that these are alternative explanations, not necessarily, supported by hard evidence, but they are definitely interesting to think about.
Okay, so what's the first one?
Well, there's the Olympic switch. That one's a doozy. The theory goes that the Titanic was deliberately swapped with its sister ship, the Olympic.
Swapped. Why would they do that?
It was all part of, get this, a massive insurance scam. The Olympic had been damaged earlier, so the theory is they switched the ships, sank the Titanic, and collected the insurance money.
Wow. Okay, that's a bit out there.
It is. But the dissertation actually mentions some of the so-called evidence conspiracy theorists point to, like inconsistencies in photographs and survivor accounts.
But wait, hasn't this whole theory been debunked?
Pretty much. Historians say that the alleged discrepancies can be explained in other ways, and there's really no solid proof that the switch ever happened, but it does show you how a good conspiracy theory can really capture people's imaginations.
For sure. Mysteries and the Titanic, they just go together. Okay, what about a conspiracy that's a bit more, I don't know, sinister? What about the Jesuit plot?
Oh, right. That one gets pretty dark. The claim is that a group of powerful financiers, maybe working with the Jesuit order, they orchestrated the sinking to get rid of some of their opponents.
Opponents? Who are they trying to get rid of?
Some of the wealthiest men on board. John Jacob Astor, Isidor Straus, Benjamin Guggenheim. The theory says they were all against the creation of the Federal Reserve, and, well, they had to be silenced.
Okay, now that's a stretch. Is there anything to back that up?
Not really. Like many conspiracy theories, it relies more on speculation than facts. Historians haven't found any real evidence to connect these men to opposition to the Federal Reserve.
So it's probably just people seeing connections where there aren't any. All right, last conspiracy. Hit me with it.
Okay, this one's pretty wild. The German U-boat attack.
A U-boat? Like a submarine?
Yeah. The theory goes that the Titanic was secretly torpedoed by a German U-boat. maybe as a test run before World War I. The evidence they point to reported explosions and a mysterious searchlight some survivors saw.
But World War I didn't start for a couple more years, right?
Exactly, and there's no record of any German U-boats being in the area at that time. So this theory, it's more speculation than anything else.
So after all this, after diving into the facts, the myths, the theories, my head's spinning, what stands out to you the most?
For me, it's the reminder that history, it's rarely as simple as we think. There are always layers to it, human choices, unforeseen circumstances, and of course, the power of stories, whether they're true or not.
Yeah. It's amazing how something that happened over 100 years ago can still spark so much debate and fascination. What about you listening? What surprised you the most about what we've uncovered today?
It gets me. It's just how many different things, how many factors played a role. It
Yeah.
wasn't just the iceberg, right? It was like this whole chain of events, decisions. Really makes you think even the smallest things can have huge consequences.
It's true. It's true. And that's what I think makes this dissertation so interesting. It really forces you to look beyond those easy explanations, to really wrestle with the complexity of history.
It wasn't just about an iceberg. No, not at all. It was about human choices and societal pressures, maybe even just bad luck, all coming together in this incredibly tragic way.
Yeah. And I don't know, it's almost like a cautionary tale, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even the most impressive, the grandest creations, they can still be vulnerable.
Absolutely. But it's also a reminder that we can learn from the past. As awful as the Titanic sinking was, it did lead to, real improvements in maritime safety.
That's true.
Increased lifeboat capacity, the International Ice Patrol. Those are direct results of the hard lessons learned from that night.
It's easy to get caught up in the tragedy, but it's good to remember that some good did come out of it. So after this deep dive, after all this, how has your understanding of the Titanic changed? Do you think any of those alternative theories, the conspiracies, hold any weight?
I'm curious to hear your thoughts too. Anything in particular that, resonated with you?
I think I'm more inclined now to see it as this web of interconnected things rather than just, one single cause. And the conspiracy theories, sure, they're fun to think about, but I'm sticking with the evidence.
That's a good approach. Always good to be a critical thinker, especially these days when there's so much information and misinformation out there.
Exactly. So to everyone listening out there, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep digging into this incredible story. Read the firsthand accounts, look at the evidence, and draw your own conclusions. The Titanic, it's a reminder of so much, of human resilience and the fragility of life and the enduring mystery of the sea.
And who knows, maybe you'll find something new, some detail, some connection that's been overlooked. That's the beauty of history. There's always something more to discover.
Until next time, deep divers.